When you have a team with A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, Cooper Kupp, Chris Godwin, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Ayuk, Rashad Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Lockett, and Brandon Cooks already rostered, what ways can you improve your team that don't involve wide receivers? Find out now on the Dynasty Nerds Team Audit.
Welcome in, Nerd Herd. This is episode 2 of Dan and Tim's Dynasty Team Audit Series. Today we have a very exciting roster. We got our very own Discord member, Adambouch, who plays in a 10-team, 1-quarterback, full PPR league. This is 4-point passing touchdowns. There are 30 roster spots. They start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 3 flexes. So a little bit different of a league, a little smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So my initial thoughts are more emphasis on starting value, less emphasis on depth. You know, when I think smaller league, those are my first 2 thoughts. Let's get rid of the fluff and let's get to the meat and potatoes. As you can tell, I haven't eaten dinner yet. Food references on point this episode. Okay, so we got our man here with the second ranked team according to the Dynasty Nerds GM 2.0 tool. And just a reminder, if you want full access to the Dynasty Nerds GM 2.0 tool, if you want a chance to be featured in a team audit series, if you want an extra podcast episode, maybe some sweet swag, you have to become a Nerd Herd member. And we are running a great promotion with our friends at Underdog Best Ball Fantasy Football right now. Use the promo code NERDS on Underdog. They'll double your deposit and get you a Nerd Herd membership for the next year to possibly get your team on this series and have Tim and I pick apart what you guys are doing. All right, so we got first thing that sticks out to me is this is a very strong quarterback room for a 1-quarterback league, right?
Absolutely.
Tim?
Yeah. I mean, when you look it over and you're like, okay, Trevor Lawrence, Lamar Jackson, you got 2 potentially top 5 quarterbacks right there. And then you have Anthony Richardson on top of it, who, especially in a 1-quarterback league, was probably the best quarterback that you could have taken in this past rookie draft that already occurred. So he's got a really deep quarterback room, but like we were kind of talking before we started up here, Dan, it's a league where having great quarterbacks, it doesn't totally matter because when you have
not at all.
When you have a 1-quarterback league with only 10 teams, I mean, if you have the 10th best quarterback, they're not scoring that far off from everything else that the top guys are scoring. So, I mean, off the top, we could really quickly go, hey, yeah, you got so much depth at quarterback, try to move these guys around, but I don't know how many teams are actually going to be searching for quarterback.
And let me show you exactly why this is an issue. This is one of the best features of the new app is you can filter by strength at a one particular position. So we got this filtered by quarterback. No surprise, we're sitting at number 1 over here. Let's go check out the bottom team. Maybe they could use some quarterback help. Oh, wait. Kyler Murray, Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, and Geno Smith.
I think he's probably fine there. What about the 9th team? What's the 9th team at?
Okay, yeah, maybe Kyler's inflating the value a little bit, so 9 could be a thing to look at.
Okay.
Dak Prescott, Bryce Young, Derek Carr, Trey Lance.
Yeah.
So 2 youth upside, 1 proven starter, and 1 guy who's a little bit questionable in Derek Carr. So still not like a dire need. And you even jump over to the 8th team, which is probably the smallest quote unquote quarterback room, but it's still 2 starters, and unless, I haven't checked the bye weeks for the Bengals and the Steelers. I don't know it off the top of my head, but unless their byes fall in the same week, you really don't need to add to this room. So we just want to really emphasize the point that for you guys in 1-quarterback leagues, especially the smaller 10-team leagues, the quarterback value is really, really deflated. So don't go over investing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a 4-point passing touchdown league and there's 10 teams and 1 quarterback, it's really such a minute value difference between you and other teams. I mean, when you go through this league, anybody from teams 1 through 8, you can make an argument would have the QB1 going into this year. Like that. I mean, obviously we usually talk about like Mahomes or Josh Allen, but there's guys that are all going to be potential QB1 guys in the top 8 teams of the league. So it doesn't really matter. So the one thing that we said about that is if a league mate comes to you and they want one of your quarterbacks, always look at doing that deal. Like be ready to do that deal at any given moment, no matter who it is. Like if you can move Trevor Lawrence or Lamar Jackson for a pretty good starting caliber running back, just probably do it. That's how little value there are in the differences in the quarterbacks.
And I'm glad you said running back, because that brings us up to the next point. Is we'll talk about the running back room here, and this is probably the one area of weakness on the roster. I mean, we have the top end is emphasis on top end. You know, with Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, 2 guys who realistically have the shot at finishing as RB1 overall any single year. However, the drop off after that is pretty severe when you got, you know, your Zamir Whites, your Samaje P. Ryans, Leonard Fournettes, Dwayne McBrides, you know, so on and so forth. These guys individually we can go into and make cases for having great weeks or good beginnings of the year or potentially being the guy down the road. But spoiler alert, this is a defending championship team. And we are definitely going for a repeat title in 2023. So we kind of are more focused on the upcoming season when evaluating this roster, because we know going into it that the goal is a title and a repeat title at that. And I feel like the second one has got to be even sweeter, right?
Yeah, I mean, going back to back, that's something guys can't usually get done. I mean, I just attempted that in my main league last year. I bought all in on all sorts of pieces and came up short. It is hard to go back to back in fantasy. Especially Dynasty, because of just the turnover of where injuries and everything goes. So you look at it and it's like, okay, Barkley and CMC, you're set at a really good top 2. But again, after that, like there might be weeks that, you know, Deonta Foreman could start, or if something happened to Bijan, that Tyler Algier can get in there, and, you know, who knows what happens. But really, you're banking on Barkley and McCaffrey staying healthy the whole year. And like we know with running backs, that doesn't always happen. That's 2 running backs that have missed significant time, multiple years in their careers. So you got to be careful with that, especially in a league that does start 2 running back slots and then has 3 receivers and 3 flex slots. I know, like, the idea there would be, oh, I probably need to pile up a lot of really good receivers, which this team actually has, but you still need to have the depth at the running back position to make sure that you can win it all this year.
So now we mentioned the wide receivers. Let's take a look at the reason why this is the defending championship, and let's look at this haul of wide receivers we have down here.
So yeah, we have A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, Cooper Kupp, Chris Godwin, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Ayuk, Rashad Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Lockett, and Brandon Cooks. I mean, this is a collection of guys that have been wide receiver 1s in their career, guys that are up and coming that look like they could become wide receiver 1s. Even you know, Brandon Cooks and Tyler Lockett at kind of at the bottom end of this are 2 guys that have multiple times in their career been wide receiver 1s. And Lockett last year, I think, was again a wide receiver 1, even though he's going to be 31 this year. So if there's a surplus of talent anywhere, it's definitely in this room. So this would be the area that you would probably be looking to move a player from. And to move to get a running back, I would think. But
yeah, because like we said before, it's start 3 wide receivers, but also start 3 flex.
Exactly.
So for those who are just starting using the app, we actually have it set up so it has your starting players in bold. Right. So in bold is the players that were last starting from last season. And you could see there are 6 bold wide receivers, which means that we are always starting wide receivers in the flex position, which in a full PPR league, I know personally I would rather start wide receivers in the flex position if I have the choice between a wide receiver and running back in a full PPR league.
I mean, I was looking before we started this, there were in full PPR leagues, there were 35 wide receivers that had over 170 fantasy points last year. And there are only 24 running backs that had over 170 fantasy points. So when you start getting into those flexes and you're getting down, you know, into the 30s, 40s on the players that are going in there, the wide receivers that are in wide receiver 30 range are performing better than running backs that are in the running back 20 range. So if you're going to stack a room, stack the wide receiver room for sure. But the other side of that is you still need to have depth in the running back room. And if you're a team like this one that's trying to go back to back and win a title, running backs that are getting older tend to be valued so much lower that you could end up trading maybe one of these wide receivers for a running back that finishes as a top 10 running back this year, because a team looking to retool or rebuild might be selling them on the cheap.
Yeah. And then before we move on to possible trades, let's just, put a bow on the whole package. The tight end room. For a team going for a repeat title, I actually love this tight end room. I think Darren Waller is, I don't want to say dark horse tight end 1 this year, because Travis Kelce has got that
still,
spot
yeah.
on lockdown. But definitely, like, Darren Waller has a chance to finish as a tight end 2 in full PPR leagues this year. I think he's going to see a lot of volume in that New York Giants offense, which doesn't feature a lot of big wide receivers. You look at the group that they assembled, and it's kind of just a bunch of smaller dudes. So Darren Waller has a very clear-cut role to fill out. So I think as an older player, he is a great go trade for win now piece in Dynasty, which we already have on this win now roster. Evan Ingram, he was franchise tagged down in Jacksonville, so he will be there for at least another year, connected with Trevor Lawrence, who we saw break out the tail end of the 2022 season, and obviously that big playoff game that he had. But now a full season, a full off season, he's going to be set up for a smash type of year.
Well, and Ingram, sneaky tight end 5 last year, so had a really good year. And Ingram and Lawrence started hooking up a lot more near the end of the year. Week 12 to week 18 last year, Evan Ingram was tight end 2 in the league. So for being a guy that looks like our value on him is pretty low, it has to do with his dynasty value and his age and some injury years that he's had. Evan Ingram, sneaky, really good upside tight end to have on this roster, especially if things don't pan out with Waller in New York.
Yep, and then not to talk too much about the tight ends, but Gerald Everett is another tight end that I love this year, with Kellen Moore coming over from Dallas to the Chargers. You saw what Dalton Schultz was able to do in the Kellen Moore offense, so I feel like Gerald Everett, the ceiling possibility is definitely there for him.
And the Chargers were kind of one of those teams that people were saying, might grab a tight end in the draft, and they didn't. So this is going to be their tight end 1. This is going to be the guy they're targeting.
Yep. And then finally, draft picks, not an abundance, but we just won the title, so that shouldn't really matter. So Tim, let's talk about some trades we can do.
Sure.
We were talking about this before the show, and I'm glad that one name stuck out to both of us that is going to be a must move off this roster, and that's going to be Tampa Bay Buccaneer wide receiver Chris Godwin. As we can see here, Chris Godwin, he's still valued in the dynasty community. I'm not saying trade Chris Godwin because he's not a good player. I'm saying trade Chris Godwin because the quarterback situation in Tampa in 2023 is not one that's going to be conducive to scoring a lot of fantasy football points. Myself being a Cleveland Browns fan, I went through the full Baker Mayfield experience, and let me tell you, I was never comfortable plugging a wide receiver into my starting lineup, knowing that we had number 6 under center. So I think Tampa Bay fans are in for a little bit of a rude awakening, because we were just talking about, the difference from going from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield. Last year you had Tampa Bay offense, which led the league in pass attempts. Tom Brady, who led the league in time to throw at the lowest mark in the league, and now we're going to a team that is going to be passing less, and Baker Mayfield, his time to throw is much higher, than Tom Brady's. So the offense as a whole is taking, a step back. And if you look at these other wide receivers, AJ Brown, Eagles offense, the same as the same. T Higgins, same as the same. Cooper Kupp, we lost Cooper Kupp halfway through the year with an injury, but before he was injured, he was actually the second leading target getting wide receiver in the league. Now that that Rams offense is going to be a little.
Yeah.
That whole team is actually going to be a little, but he's still going to be a target because Stafford's still there and they still have that connection.
Exactly. You always want to bet on a guy like Cooper Kupp. That's just, ever since Stafford has gone there, he's been unstoppable. So that's, if you're going to bet on anybody here, you want to be betting on Cooper Kupp. So I don't think he would be the one you want to move, even though he's getting up there in age. If you're trying to win a title, this is a guy that's a cheat code. So yeah, you got to keep him.
Yeah, because I feel like with us being win now, trying to go for the repeat, age should not be a concern for us. We're not looking to retool this.
Exactly.
One of the questions we got with the submission is like, when do I start thinking about retooling and rebuilding and gathering more pieces? And Tim and I agree. Our answer is go get those titles.
Until you stop winning.
Yes, until you stop winning is basically when this roster needs to be retooled. And that's the great thing about Dynasty Fantasy Football is there's so many different ways to play it. You enjoy your true dynasty, quote unquote. That is the goal, to build the dynasty and win multiple championships. And then once you're done winning, then you enter your rebuild phase, and it's kind of like a whole new version of fantasy football you're playing. So enjoy this pocket of competitiveness that you're in, because it goes away very quickly.
Well, and so I think so. We agreed on Godwin. I think we can start looking around at guys that we can trade for Godwin. I just wanted to mention, like, the thing that scares me with Godwin. I know the hype train's kind of gotten back up around him, just because he is a very talented wide receiver. There's no doubt. But like Dan was mentioning, the highest volume pass offense is what he was in last year. He was 6th in receptions in the NFL amongst wide receivers last year, 6th. And he finished 18th in PPR. So even though he's getting a ton of receptions, he didn't even finish in the top 15 in wide receivers. Everyone else from 1 through 5 and even 7, which I believe was Devontae Adams behind him in receptions, all finished in the top 7 wide receivers last year. So all of these guys that are getting high volumes of receptions are having that turn out into being elite wide receivers, where Godwin, he's getting kind of a little more hype this offseason now because of everybody noticing that, like, he had a ton of receptions. He was getting the ball like crazy. Well, it didn't turn into elite numbers in fantasy for us, and he's going to have Baker Mayfield now instead of Tom Brady. So I would move on from him while you can. The other thing is he's never completed a full year without getting injured. So it is a guy that has an injury tendency. So if we can move a guy like that still has really good name value and had a really good year last year, but get ourselves another running back that could help us win it all, that's what we should be looking to do.
Yeah. So now, one feature I like about the GM tool that we have right now is that you can filter league strength by position, because we obviously need some running back help. And the nice thing is we don't need just we can grab any veteran running back. Like, it doesn't have to be a young up and coming guy. It could be a 1 year left type of guy. It could be a guy who is going to be thrust into a role for 2023 that might be replaced in 2024. We don't care about any of those things. We can actually kind of think with a redraft mindset when looking for these running backs. So what we can do over here is we can filter the league by just the running back position and see how the teams stack up. And we got this team over here, Clovers, who is clearly the strongest at the running back position. And if you come down here, he's got Jahmyr Gibbs, who he just drafted, Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, and then a bunch of depth pieces following that. So this, to me, says, hey, this guy has surplus value at the running back position. This is somebody that we could potentially make a trade with to help improve our running back stock. And obviously, the thing we're trying to move is Chris Godwin in this case. So if we look at his wide receiver core, it is much different than the one we were just looking at.
It is, after Justin Jefferson and Devonta Smith. I mean, I guess DJ Moore you can still have as, a really good wide receiver for sure that is startable. But then
Tim says that as a Bears fan.
As a Bears fan who just, we got DJ Moore on the Bears now. The problem with Moore is when can he jump into that elite level? It's usually kind of right around, the 1,100 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns every single year. And that's a high-end wide receiver too, but there's a lot of guys that can kind of fit that mold. So after Jefferson and Smith, we have DJ Moore, but then it's Tillman, Claypool, Juju, Paris Campbell, Brian Edwards is still on a team.
He will never die. I have him rostered in some of my teams.
Diami Brown and Traquan Smith is still on the team. So there's not a lot going on here after those top couple guys. He has so much depth at running back that I could see him being like, yeah, I need to improve my receiver room, especially with having 3 receivers that have to start and then the additional 3 flex spots. So this is a team that's definitely a candidate for trading.
So let us jump over to our trade calculator, and we will grab Clovers as our trade partner over here. And so now this screen is really nice because it lays out both rosters side by side and lets you, build your own trade basically. So Chris Godwin is the player that we want to move on from because we think he's not going to be a very helpful asset in the 2023 season. And then Tim and I were talking before we went and started recording. There's actually a tier of running backs right here. Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, and J.K. Dobbins that we think would be good targets to come in and fill that running back 3 slot behind Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey. So we could just talk about each of their situations real fast. Josh Jacobs with the Las Vegas Raiders. He's on a contract here, correct, Tim?
Yes.
I believe that's correct, yeah. So he got an immense workload last year, and he's basically playing for money this year. He might be out of Las Vegas after the year is over, but like we said, we're not concerned with 2024 production right now. We're going for a repeat title. Right. So for 2023, I really like Josh Jacobs. Kenneth Walker in Seattle had an amazing rookie campaign. Then they drafted Zach Charbonnet in the second round this year. So I think the Kenneth Walker one might be a bit of feeling that owner out.
Yeah.
I mean, Tim, have you seen a lot of Kenneth Walker moves lately?
Yeah, I mean, from the ones I've seen, it seems to be guys that are, I wouldn't call it panic selling, but trying to get value back for him before there's a panic sell. And kicking the tires with Clovers here and finding out is Kenneth Walker someone he's worried about is probably a good start to this. Surprisingly, Dobbins, I think, is the one of this 3 that has seen the highest value somehow, that like everybody was excited about how the year ended for him and the upside of what J.K. Dobbins could be, because we haven't been able to see it fully fleshed out yet with his injuries and everything. So Jacobs might actually be more attainable than him in this deal, depending on how this guy is feeling. But I think Walker's probably the first one that you can target and know that there's probably some skepticism from this owner. Now, if he comes back and he's a year 2 guy and I'm not worried about Charbonnet, then you can back off of him. That's fine. Josh Jacobs is sneaky 25 years old still, like just turned 25 in February, like not really all that old, and was running back 3 last year. So this is the exact kind of guy we'd be talking about that you'd want to grab to have elite talent on your roster.
Yeah, and then Dobbins is actually in the same boat that Jacobs is.
Right.
He's in a contract here for the Ravens. I'm not convinced that they're going to be bringing him back after all the money they just spent on Lamar. But these are all reasons why you should communicate with league mates prior to making trades.
And Dobbins was just he was just trying to get a bigger contract. He was talking to the Ravens about wanting a higher contract, so he could be worried about that as well.
Yeah, because for each of these running backs, we can make a pro and we can make a con, and you don't know where your league mate's mindset sits.
Right.
So definitely open a line of communication and be like, hey, I'm interested in Jacobs, Walker, and Dobbins. Let's figure out how you feel about any of those 3, and let's see if we can put together a deal that helps out your wide receiver room, helps out my running back
for
room.
Sure.
So if we're throwing something on the calculator, Tim, who would be your choice out of those 3 to get us a repeat title in 2023?
If we're going to try to repeat for a title, it's Josh Jacobs. I mean, like if we're going to swing for it, let's swing for it. I mean, this is a guy that was, like I said, running back 3 last year. surrounded by running back 2 Christian McCaffrey and running back 5 Saquon Barkley that are already on our teams. So if we can have 3 top 5 running backs on our team plus the rest of the receivers that are in that room, you're going to be almost impossible to beat.
So we have just the 2 players selected. We can go to compare players and it'll tell us how far we're off. So it says we're about 1,674 points off, and then it gives you some recommendations over here. Rashad Bateman, another Raven, DeAndre Hopkins, still waiting to see where he signs, and then Tyler Lockett, who is a nice veteran win now type of piece that I would like to keep around on the roster because he low-key always has 1,000 yards every year, no matter what. He can always plug him into your wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 position and just feel completely fine about it. So I hate to do this, but what if we get rid of the golden goose?
Yeah, I mean,
before it turns into a pumpkin.
And even if it turns into a golden goose in a league that's 1 quarterback, it really doesn't kill you to try to do something like that.
Exactly, because you still have Lamar Jackson and Trevor Lawrence.
So and this is a team that has Justin Herbert as his lead quarterback, but then Matthew Stafford, and somehow Carson Wentz is on a team, Dan. So Carson Wentz and Matthew Stafford.
Do not forget about
Ian Book. Ian Book. That's right. I forgot the emergence of Ian Book. That's definitely going to happen. So yeah, I mean with those possibilities, I think he could actually be interested in Richardson.
So, and now this says Clover wins the trade by 462 points, which in my mind is a rounding error at that point. It's marginal at best. This league only does 3 rounds of rookie drafts, so there's no 4th rounders we can throw in. But like I said, this is why you open up lines of communication with your league mates and you get a feel of what they want. He might realize that quarterbacks aren't valued in this league. I don't think that's the case, considering Carson Wentz and Ian Book are currently sitting at the bottom of his roster. But this is why you talk back and forth, you talk it out, and you try to get a move done.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you look over this team, I think this team is probably one that is going to be at the top of this league, if not the top of the league most of the year. The depth is there at wide receiver for sure. The top pieces that are in the running back room already are great. And then obviously really good quarterbacks. And we talked about tight ends being very competitive. So the main thing here is just going through your teams and finding out who has maybe a veteran running back or a surplus at running back that they're willing to move on from to get better at wide receiver, because you have so many good wide receivers that you can move one very easily to get a running back.
Yeah, because there's a ton of great veteran buys right now. I'm talking about, Joe Mixon people are still undervaluing. You got David Montgomery, Jamal Williams, or Alvin Kamara, either of the New Orleans Saints running backs. So James Conner at the Cardinals, hold your nose, make that trade. There are a lot of really good veteran running back buys. And, just like I said, open the lines of communication, talk to your league mates, and figure out what it's going to take, because there is nothing sweeter in this world than back-to-back Dynasty Fantasy Football Championships.
Absolutely. Hanging the banner.
And if you guys want... yes, hanging the banner. And if you guys want help, be sure to stay tuned to the Dynasty Team Audit Series. Just a reminder, if you want your team to be featured on the series, you have to become a member of our Nerd Herd. You can do so very easily by taking advantage of our promotion with Underdog Fantasy Football. Use promo code NERDS when signing up. Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100, and we'll get you into the Nerd Herd. We'll get you onto our Discord, and be sure to look out for giveaways and announcements to get yourself. Have Tim audit your Dynasty Fantasy Football teams. We'll see you next time, Nerd Herd.
Take care, everybody.